it going, everyone? How's it going, everybody? And welcome to the Talk Sports Show with host Alec Pecano on Friday, February 2nd. Today's show, we will be going over my way too early Big Ten predictions. Let's get right to it. We're going to start off with my way too early Big Ten standings prediction. I cut this into two slots. We're going to start off with 18 through 11. And number 18, I have Purdue. Okay, so my reasoning as to why Purdue is at number 18 in the Big Ten rankings is it's Ryan Walters' second year, and I don't. They have the talent, but I don't know if in year two they're going to be able to compete in the Big Ten. So we will have to wait and see on that. Rutgers is at number 17. I think Rutgers is due for a huge regression this year. I liked how good Rutgers was last year, but I think they're due for a fall back down to they're going to fall flat on their face, I think, and finish at the bottom of the Big Ten. Number 17, Minnesota. That was number 17, Rutgers, 16, Minnesota. Now, reasoning as to why Minnesota is here, they lost a few players in the transfer portal, including their quarterback, Ethan Kaliakmanis. And they don't really have a QB on scholarship right now. They're going to be looking for one, and they may get one in the portal. If Ohio State loses one of their quarterbacks, they may think about going to Minnesota because I know they could start there. But right now, Minnesota does not have a quarterback, and I think they're due to be not the worst team in the Big Ten, but one of the three worst teams in the conference next year. Number 15, Illinois. Now, with Illinois, are we going to see improvement from Luke Altmaier? Luke Altmaier was decent, was okay last season. But are we going to see a step up from Luke Altmaier in 2024? If we do, maybe when I did this before the season, Illinois might be higher, but right now they're at 15. 14, Indiana. Some people may say this is a little too high for Indiana because they think it's going to take a couple years for Kirk Cignetti to round up a couple good recruiting classes and be able to compete. I think otherwise. I think they will finish within the 14 to maybe 10 range in the Big Ten this year. But I don't think they finish outside of that. If they do, that means they're overachieving, which I could see happening, but at the same time, I could see them finishing right around here because they're still in a rebuild. Indiana's still kind of rebuilding in football. And I could see an avenue where they do end up finishing below everybody else in the Big Ten. At number 13, one of the new teams in the Big Ten, UCLA. Now, the reason UCLA is at number 13 is because they're new to the Big Ten, and I don't really know if they want to keep Chip Kelly. I think they might get rid of Chip Kelly. For some obscene reason, I think they might get rid of Chip Kelly and get a new coach if they struggle to start the season. Number 12, Northwestern. Now, pump the brakes. I could have put, these are the way too early rankings, standings, as you can see. Pump the brakes. My expectations for Northwestern are still kind of low because I don't know what David Braun is going to do in year number, his first his second season as head coach. They could have a really good season, or they could have a small regression, which wouldn't be the worst. Number 11, Maryland. Now, Maryland last year was in the top 10, but they're at number 11 right now because they don't have a QB. They don't really have a quarterback. If they had a quarterback, I would have them higher, but they don't have a QB right now. And that's the one issue I have with Maryland. Now, the top 10. Number 10, Washington. The reason Washington's not inside the top 9 and they're at 10 is because they're replacing Kalen DeBoer with Jedd Fisch, which I still like. I like the hire of Jedd Fisch, and I thought he was going to poach some of his kids that he had at Arizona away and bring them over to Washington. But he didn't. I mean, he brought a couple with him, but still, that's not. I still can see Washington being good in the Big Ten in their first year in the Big Ten. Will Rogers is their quarterback, and I think that Washington's going to be okay in their first year in the Big Ten. Number 9, Michigan State. Now, I was having trouble. I wanted to put Michigan State lower than this. I wanted to put them at 14 or 15, but then I remembered they got Jonathan Smith, and I think they will be one of the most improved teams in the Big Ten next year. I like Jonathan Smith. I think they're going to have a similar first year to what Matt Rhule had this year with Nebraska. 7 wins, 6 or 7 wins, bowl game. Maybe they win their bowl game. Speaking of Nebraska, they're at number 8. I liked the first year under head coach Matt Rhule for Nebraska. I thought they had a really good season. Nobody was expecting him to do good, not even me. I thought that, and it completely turned and went the other way. I like Nebraska a lot. I think they will compete in the Big Ten this year. Number 7, Wisconsin. Wisconsin had a disappointing end to last season. Will Wisconsin bounce back this year? I think they will. And as a matter of fact, I think Wisconsin could finish higher than this at the end of the season. But here we go. We get into the top 6. Number 6, Iowa. They poached 5-star offensive lineman Caden Proctor away from Alabama in the portal, and that's a huge pickup for Iowa on their offensive line. I love the pickup of Caden Proctor for that offensive line for Iowa. I think they're going to be just fine this year. You will get all the record predictions for every Big Ten team in a minute. Number 5, USC. Now, this is another team I'm going to say kind of pump the brakes on because, and it's not to do with their offense. I think their offense is going to be just fine with Miller Moss. It's their defense that I'm worried about. They did get a new defensive coordinator, but we saw the USC defense last year and how bad they were. Can they improve just a slight bit under their new defensive coordinator? If they can, I think they can finish higher than 5 and start the year inside the top 4. At number 4, Penn State. Just lightly tap the brakes on Penn State because, and I'm going to say why. 1, can they beat Michigan? Can they beat either Michigan or Ohio State this year? And 2, they have 2 new coordinators. They have a new defensive coordinator and a new offensive coordinator. Can they will they be able to compete with the top 3 schools in the Big Ten? At number 3, Michigan. Now, I was debating on whether to flip Penn State and Michigan because Penn State has a lot more returning than Michigan does. Michigan's losing their head coach, their quarterback, one of their running backs, a bunch of defensive guys, and a couple offensive linemen. But I think Michigan is gonna be. I think Michigan's gonna be still be okay. I don't know if they're going to win the Big Ten, but I think they will compete for the Big Ten title. Number 2, Oregon. Or Mario Cristobal. No. Correction, Dan Lanning. Dan Lanning has done a heck of a job recruiting and in the portal, which I wasn't surprised when he went in the portal to get the quarterback that he wanted. And number 1, Ohio State. Have you seen the work Ohio State has done in the portal? If you haven't, you probably should go look. They got Will Howard, Quinshon Judkins, Seth McLaughlin, Caleb Downs. They have been putting in the work on the in the portal and recruiting. Recruiting wise, getting Aaron Nolan, Jeremiah Smith, Edrin Houston. They will be a force in the Big Ten this year. Here's my tier list. Way too early tier list for 2024 for the Big Ten. The bottom feeders: Purdue, Minnesota, Indiana, Illinois. Now, and I explained why a minute ago on all of these teams why I think they will be where they are. Middle of the pack in the Big Ten: Northwestern, Maryland, UCLA, Michigan State. It's self-explanatory, but once I do this, again, I will go over it. Conference contenders: Penn State, Nebraska, Iowa, Wisconsin. And then the conference championship contenders: Ohio State, USC, Oregon, Michigan. Bottom feeders: these, what I consider a bottom feeder in the conference is a team that's going to probably win 4 or 5 games, at most 6. And that would be Penn State. That would be Purdue, Indiana, Minnesota, Illinois. And the reason I think these teams could win between 4 to 6 games is because they have to play each other, obviously, but they have to play everybody else. And on any given Saturday, anybody can win. It doesn't matter if you're a bottom feeder or a conference championship contender. Middle of the pack. So we're going to start with Northwestern. Like I said, temper your expectations ever so slightly on Minnesota and on Northwestern, because we don't know how good Northwestern's going to be this coming year. If they are good, then we can move them up the tier list, because I'm going to redo this tier list after every week in the Big Ten this year, and I'm going to do it for every conference. Maryland, same thing. Loxley has proven that no matter who's at quarterback, that he can be good, a good coach. UCLA, like I said a minute ago, Chip Kelly, it doesn't really seem like he wants to be there. It doesn't seem like UCLA wants him, but you never know. And it's kind of self-explanatory with those. Way too early championship game predictions. I have 3. My first one is Oregon, Ohio State. I could see this being the Big Ten title game. Or I could see it being Michigan, Ohio State, or Ohio State, Washington. Or maybe I could see an avenue where Michigan does make the Big Ten title game, and it's somebody other than Ohio State in the Big Ten title game against Michigan. Maybe a Washington, maybe an Oregon, maybe a Penn State. If Penn State can win a bunch of games and get lucky in the Big Ten, here's my list of most improved, way too early most improved teams in the Big Ten. Indiana, Michigan State, Purdue, Northwestern. Now, Indiana, the reason I think they can be improved is because they got Kirk Cignetti as their head coach. And if you look at what Cignetti did at James Madison, the 2 years that he was there when they were in the FBS, they started the year undefeated this year and then flamed out at the end. But I think he can do something similar to that if you give him time at Indiana. Michigan State. Jonathan Smith is a really good head coach. Michigan State fans, all I'm going to say is you need to give him a couple of years. If you give him a couple of years, you will see the results. Purdue, kind of the same thing with Ryan Walters' second year. They're going to be improved. But the question is, how many games are they going to improve by? Northwestern, like I keep saying, I think they're going to improve even more this year. Maybe 8-4, 7-5. They will make another bowl game. And now I'm going to give you every Big Ten team's record prediction as well as their schedule for the 2024 season. And we are going to start with the defending national champions, Michigan. So Michigan starts at the year at home against Fresno State. I think they beat Fresno State, so they're 1-0. They play Texas week 2. They lose to Texas, so they're 1-1. They play Arkansas State. That's a win, so they're 2-1. USC, first conference game. It's a home game. I think they win, so they're 3-1. Then they play Minnesota. They're going to be 4-1 going into the Washington game. At Washington. I think they lose to Washington, so they're 4-2. Then they go into their first bye week. They come out of their first bye week. They're going to beat Illinois 5-2, beat Michigan State 6-2, lose to Oregon 6-3, beat Indiana 7-3, beat Northwestern 8-3, and lose to Ohio State 8-4. So I think Michigan this year goes 8-4. Next, we're going to do Illinois. So Illinois starts out the year at home against Eastern Illinois. And I think they beat Eastern Illinois, so they're 1-0. Then they play Kansas. They lost to Kansas last year. I think they get them this year, so they're going to start the year 2-0. They get Central Michigan at home, homecoming. I think that's a win. So they start the year 3-0. Again, these are way too early record predictions. Way too early. That means before the transfer portal's done and all the recruiting. So they're 3-0. They play at Nebraska to start conference play. I think that's a loss, so they're 3-1. 3-2 after they lose to Penn State. Then they come out of their first bye week, play Purdue. I think that's a loss. So they're 3-3. They're going to be 3-4 after they lose to Michigan. 3-5 after they lose to Oregon. 4-5 after they beat Minnesota. 5-5 after they beat Michigan State. 5-6 after they lose to Rutgers, and 6-6 after they beat Northwestern. So my way too early record prediction for Illinois is 6-6, which is a bowl game. So Indiana, here's their schedule. And I'm going to give you my way too early record prediction for them. So they start the year at home against FIU. I think that's a win. I see 2 wins their first 2 weeks. So they beat FIU and beat Western Illinois. So they're 2-0. Then they go to UCLA to open Big Ten play. I think that's a loss because it's a cross-country travel from Bloomington to Pasadena. So they're 2-1. Then they play Charlotte. They beat Charlotte, so they're 3-1. Lose to Maryland, 3-2. Lose to Northwestern, 3-3. They beat Nebraska last year. I think Nebraska beats them this year. So they're 3-4. They lose to Washington, 3-5. Beat Michigan State, 4-5. Lose to Michigan, 3-6. Lose to Ohio State, 3-7. And then beat Purdue, 4-7. So Indiana and Kirk Cignetti's first year, my way too early prediction before the season is 4-7 for Indiana. So here is Iowa's 2024. Oh, they start the year against Illinois State. I think Illinois State is one of the better FCS schools, but I think Iowa beats them, so they're 1-0. Then they get the Cyhawk, the Iowa Corn Cyhawk series. At home this year against Iowa State. I think they beat Iowa State. So they're 2-0. And then they get Troy. I think they start the year 3-0. Then they go to Minnesota. I think that's going to be a win. So they're now 4-0. Then they come out of their bye week. Their first bye week, and they got a gauntlet other than Northwestern and Michigan State. They go to Ohio State. They're going to lose to Ohio State, so they're 3-1. They might lose to, I think they lose to Washington, so 3-2. Beat Michigan State 4-2. Beat Northwestern 5-2. Lose to Wisconsin 5-3. And beat UCLA 6-3. So then they get their last bye week. And then they come out of that and they play at Maryland. So they're 6-3. I think they beat Maryland 7-3. And lose to Nebraska. So Iowa goes 7-4 this year. My way too early prediction for them before the season is 7-4. Maryland. So Maryland, they start the year at home against UConn. I think they beat UConn, so they're 1-0. Michigan State at home, that's a win, 2-0. At Virginia, a win, 3-0. They're going to start the year 5-0. I think they beat all 5 teams they put. So they beat UConn, beat Michigan State, beat Virginia, beat Villanova, and Indiana. So they're 5-0. They come out of their bye week and they play Northwestern. I think that's a win, so they start 6-0. Lose to USC 6-1. Beat Minnesota 7-1. Then they get Oregon, Rutgers, Iowa, Penn State. Lose to Oregon 7-2. Beat Rutgers 8-2. Lose to Iowa 8-3, and beat Penn State 9-3. So Maryland's way too early record prediction is 9-3. Michigan State. Here's Michigan State. So they're springing as a guy. They start the year against Florida Atlantic. I think that's a win, 1-0. They lose to Maryland 1-1. I think now that Boston College is looking for a new head coach, I think Michigan State beats Boston College, so they're 2-1. Then they get Ohio State at home. Unfortunately, I think that's a loss. So they're 2-2. They lose at Oregon 2-3. Lose to Iowa 2-4. Lose to Michigan 2-5. Beat Indiana 3-5. 3-5. Wait. So beat Florida Atlantic 1-0. Lose to Maryland 1-1. Beat Boston College 2-1. Lose to Ohio State 2-2. Lose to Oregon 2-3. Lose to Iowa 2-4. Lose to Michigan 2-5. Beat Indiana 3-5. Beat Illinois 4-5. Lose to Purdue 4-6 and beat and then lose to Rutgers 4-7. So Michigan State's first year under Jonathan Smith, they will go 4-7. Minnesota 2024 schedule. They start the year at home against North Carolina. I unfortunately think that's going to be a loss. So they're 0-1. They beat Rhode Island, so they're 1-1. Beat Nevada 2-1. Lose to Iowa 2-2. Lose to Michigan 2-3. Lose to USC 2-4. Beat UCLA 3-4. And then they come out of their first bye week, play Maryland. I think they beat Maryland, so they're 4-4. They go to 5-4 after beating Illinois, so they're 5-4. They get bowl eligible by beating Rutgers 6-4. Lose to Penn State 7-5, and lose to Wisconsin 7-6. So Minnesota's way too early record prediction is 7-6. We've got Nebraska next. So Nebraska, they start the year at home against UTEP. I think they beat UTEP, so they're 1-0. I think they lose to Colorado, so they're 1-1. Beat Northern Iowa 2-1. Beat Illinois 3-1. Beat Purdue 4-1. Lose to Rutgers 4-2. Then they get Indiana after their bye week, so they're 4-2. They're going to be 5-2. They go in 5-2, and they go into Columbus October 26th. I think they lose to Ohio State, so they're 4-3. No, they're 5-3. Then they beat UCLA to get bowl eligible 6-3. Lose to USC 6-4. Lose to Wisconsin 6-5, and lose to Iowa 6-6. So Nebraska's going to go 6-6. Northwestern. Their first game of the year is at home against Miami of Ohio. I think they lose to Miami of Ohio, so they're 0-1. They play Duke. They're going to be 0-2. They get their first one of the year, though, against Eastern Illinois, so they're 1-2. I think they lose to Washington 1-3. Then they come out of their first bye week and play Indiana. So they're 2-3. They're 1-3. after they come out of the first bye week. Indiana's going to be a win, so that's 2-3. I think they lose to Maryland 2-4, lose to Wisconsin 2-5, 2-6 after they lose to Iowa. They beat Purdue 3-6, lose to Ohio State 3-7, lose to Michigan 3-8, and I think they beat Illinois and go 4-8. Penn State. They start the year at West Virginia. I think they beat West Virginia. So they're 1-0. Then they play Bowling Green at home. That's another win, so 2-0. Then they go and they come out of their first bye week, play Kent State, 3-0. Beat Illinois 4-0. Lose to USC. Lose to UCLA 3-1. Lose to USC 3-2. Beat Wisconsin 4-2. Lose to Ohio State 4-3. Beat Washington 5-3. Beat Purdue 6-3. Lose to Minnesota 6-4. Beat Maryland 7-4. So Penn State's way too early record prediction is 7-4. Oregon's next. Oregon starts the year with Idaho. I think that's going to be a win. They're going to start 3-0. I think they beat Idaho, Boise State, and Oregon State. So then they get into conference play at UCLA. I think that's a win. So they're 4-0, 5-0 after they beat Michigan State. I think their first loss comes to Ohio State, so they're 4-1. Beat Purdue 5-1. Beat Illinois 6-1. Probably beat Michigan 7-1. 8-1 after they beat Maryland. 8-2 after they lose to Wisconsin. And then they play Washington. Loss 8-3. So Oregon's first year in the Big Ten, they will go 8-3. Purdue. They play Indiana State to start the year. I think that's a win. Then they play Notre Dame in West Lafayette. That's going to be a loss. So they're 1-1. Oregon State, that's a win. So they're 2-1. Nebraska, win 3-1. Lose to Wisconsin, 4-2. Wait. Yeah. So they beat Indiana State, lose to, so they were 1-1, 2-1, 3-1, 3-2. Illinois 4-2. They're going to be 4-3 after losing to Oregon. I think they lose to Northwestern, so they're 4-4. 4-5 after losing to Ohio State. Lose to Penn State 4-6. Beat Michigan State 5-6, and beat Indiana 6-6. So Purdue's way too early record prediction is going to be 6-6. Now we've got Rutgers. So Rutgers, they start the year with Howard. I think they beat Howard, so they're 1-0. They beat Akron 2-0. So they come out of their first bye week. They play at Virginia Tech. That's a loss. So they're 2-1. They lose to Washington 2-2. Lose to Nebraska 2-3. Lose to Wisconsin 2-4. Beat UCLA 3-4. Lose to USC 3-5. Beat Minnesota 4-5. Beat Maryland 5-5. Beat Illinois 6-5. And they go 7-5 after beating Michigan State. So it is USC next. We just did. Sorry, we're having all this. UCLA schedule. So they start the year against Hawaii. At Hawaii, I think that's a win, so they're 1-0. They beat Indiana 2-0 after their first bye week, so they're 2-0. Then they go to LSU. That's going to be a loss, so they're 2-1. They lose to Oregon 2-2, lose to Penn State 2-3, beat Minnesota 3-3, lose to Rutgers 3-4, beat Nebraska 5-4, lose to Iowa 5-5, lose to Washington 5-6, lose to USC 5-7, and beat Fresno State 7-7, 6-7. Yes, UCLA schedule's a little weird. Here's USC's schedule. So they start the year against LSU at home. I think that's a win, so they're 1-0. They beat Utah State 2-0. So they come out of their first bye week. They play Michigan. I think that's where they lose their first game. So they're 2-1. Lose to Wisconsin 2-2. Beat Minnesota 3-2. Beat Penn State 4-2. Beat Maryland 5-2. Lose to Rutgers 5-3. Beat Washington 6-3. Beat Nebraska 7-3. Beat UCLA 8-3 and lose to Notre Dame 8-4. So USC goes 8-4. Got Wisconsin, Washington, and Ohio State. Okay. So Wisconsin starts the year with Western Michigan. I think that's a win, so they're 1-0. They start the year 2-0 after beating South Dakota. I think they lose to Alabama, so they're 2-1. Beat USC 3-1. Beat Purdue 4-1. At Rutgers win 5-1. Lose to Northwestern somehow 5-2. Beat Penn State 6-2. Beat Iowa 7-2. Lose to Oregon 7-3. Beat Nebraska 8-3. And beat Minnesota 9-3. So Wisconsin goes 9-3 as their way too early prediction. Washington, their way too early record prediction. They start the year 2-0. They go into that Washington State game undefeated, and it's in Seattle this year at Lumen Field. I think they beat Washington State to go to 3-0. Beat Northwestern 4-0. Beat Rutgers 5-0. Lose to Michigan 5-1. Lose to Iowa 5-2. Beat Indiana 6-2. Beat USC 7-2. Lose to Penn State 7-3. Beat UCLA 8-3. They come out of their last bye week and play at Oregon, and I think Oregon beats them, so they're 8-4. And we've got Ohio State. So Ohio State starts the year with Akron and Western Michigan. I think those are 2 wins. So then they come out of their first bye week and they play Marshall. I think that's a win, so they're 3-0. Beat Michigan State 4-0. I think they do beat Iowa, so they're 5-0 going into the Oregon game, which that could be where game day goes October 12th at Autzen Stadium if both teams are undefeated. I think Ohio State beats Oregon to start the year 6-0. Then they get their second bye week. After that, they play Nebraska. I think they beat Nebraska 7-0. Win at Penn State 8-0. Beat Purdue 9-0. Beat Northwestern 10-0. Beat Indiana 11-0. So they go into the Michigan game undefeated against the Michigan team that might have 2 or 3 losses. I think they beat Michigan and go undefeated in the regular season and go 12-0. They're trying to pull a Michigan from last year. So Ohio State's way too early record prediction is 12-0. Now here are my college basketball upset picks for today on the Talk Sports Show. My first upset is Toledo +5 to upset Akron. Now, does this upset happen? I think it does. I think Toledo upsets Akron. My second upset is Niagara +5.5 to upset St. Peter's. I think this one also happens. We went 10-5. We went over 500 last night in upsets. I think Niagara does pull the upset here, +5.5 against St. Peter's. I like Niagara a lot. Anytime they play, I pick them. My third upset is Mount St. Mary's +3 to upset Marist. I really like this upset pick a lot. And then you've got Butler +9.5 to upset Creighton. Now, this is the one I don't think happens, but it would be catastrophic if it does. And then my free play of the night for college basketball for this slate of upsets is Nevada -11.5 to cover against San Jose State. Nevada is very good in basketball. And I think they can cover this spread. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know if you knew, I do offer membership/merch. And the merch is very easy to find. I tag it in all my videos. And if you're enjoying this video, as a matter of fact, leave a thumbs up. Leave a thumbs up and turn on notifications so you don't miss any future uploads. And please leave a comment down below. But I do also offer memberships. And the memberships are so easy to find. All you do is you see the little join button next to the subscribe button. If you've already subscribed, thank you. I appreciate every single one of you that's already subscribed to the Talk Sports YouTube channel. If you aren't yet, I would highly recommend it so you don't miss any future videos. And please also turn on notifications. Now, here's my NBA upset picks for tonight. My first one, and I'm just going to go through these in order. So, I've got the Magic +7 to upset the Timberwolves. I've got the Pacers +2 to upset the Sacramento Kings. And the Toronto Raptors +4 to upset the Rockets. And my free play of the night in the NBA is the LA Clippers versus Detroit Pistons over 235.5 points. And if you didn't know, I also have a Patreon page where all these videos that I do also go up on Patreon and they go up on Twitch. Let's get more members to go that are here on YouTube to go over to the Patreon as well. But that'll wrap up today's video. I will see you again at 1 o'clock for the rest of my college basketball upset picks. Till then, this is the Talk Sports Show. Host Alec Peccato signing off. Have a great day.